This is GovExec Daily, where we bring you the federal stories that really matter. It's January 13th, 2022. I'm Restaurant Fortuné. This week, the Biden administration published new guidance about the federal vaccine mandate, specifically for unvaccinated feds. The White House Safer Federal Workforce Task Force wrote in an update that agencies must test unvaccinated workers who report to a federal facility or otherwise interact with members of the public on a weekly basis. The deadline for implementation of this testing program is February 15th. The program will apply to federal employees who have either a pending or approved request for an exception from Biden's requirement that the federal workforce be vaccinated. Unvaccinated employees who are working remotely or via maximum telework will not be required to undergo this testing, although they will be tested in advance if they need to report to an agency facility. Concerns about the accuracy of rapid tests and the timeline of the more accurate PCR tests have caused confusion among Americans during this Omicron surge, but experts say that the tests remain the best way to get data on case rates. According to a report by GovExec, some agencies have notched 100% compliance with Biden's vaccine mandate. The task force update also noted that those refusing tests may face discipline. With more than a month before the deadline, the administration continues to promote vaccines as the strongest defense against the COVID-19 crisis. GovExec senior reporter Erich Wagner covers the federal workforce. After a short break, he'll join me to discuss the Safer Federal Workforce Task Force update on the testing requirements.
This content is brought to you by Oracle Cloud. From securing combat communications to creating actionable intelligence, U.S. warfighters count on Oracle Cloud for mission success. Find out more at oracle.com/DoD.
The Omicron variant has changed the calculus of pandemic guidance at the CDC and throughout state and local health departments. As the more transmissible virus infects more people, federal agencies are now getting guidance from the White House Safer Federal Workforce Task Force on how to deal with the pandemic during this latest surge. GovExec senior reporter Erich Wagner covers the federal workforce. He joins me now to discuss the task force guidance and other pay and benefit stories that he has been following. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
The task force has an update on testing requirements for unvaccinated feds, including those who got religious or medical exemptions. What's in this update, and how is it going to affect federal employees?
The top line is the administration has set a deadline of February 15th for agencies to set up their testing programs for unvaccinated feds. Like you said, it's a pretty substantial update to the administration's COVID guidance. It establishes that folks who are unvaccinated and commute to a federal work site, federal facility, an agency office, what have you, or if they are in jobs where they maybe don't do that, but still interact with the public. Think maybe food inspectors at the agriculture department, something like that. If these federal employees are unvaccinated, they need to be tested weekly to screen that they do not have COVID. Some of it is going to be up to agencies' discretion, whether they have testing just on site at the federal facility or whether they, pay for employees to go to, a pharmacy or drive-through testing or, all of the various things that are in the testing apparatus in this country right now. They will also reimburse for, self-tests, but there's a key caveat here, and that is federal employees who are part of this program, they can't just sort of take it at home with no one around and self-report the results. it has to be under some form of agency supervision or some, through a telehealth provider, a doctor via telehealth or something like that. One interesting part, in most cases, federal contractors with contractor employees who are unvaccinated and work at federal facilities will not be expected to submit to the weekly testing, at least under this, agency provision. Although some agencies also may elect, because of specific issues within their workplaces or job functions, to require both vaccinated employees and unvaccinated contractors to get tested. I would assume this has something to, would be healthcare settings, things like that. And like I said, agencies are responsible for paying for the testing program or reimbursing employees.
The question that's come up a lot when we've been covering the vaccine mandate has been about discipline. What happens if the feds refuse to be tested, or they don't test within the rules that you've sort of outlined about having to do it through a proper telehealth avenue or under agency supervision? What's the discipline going to be like? How's that going to come down?
So yeah, the guidance doesn't go too deep into detail about the types of discipline, but it does say that if a federal employee refuses to comply with the testing program, they will be subject to discipline and adverse personnel actions, and they can be barred from their workplace. They can, the agency can just say you're not allowed to come, and then put them on administrative leave until the disciplinary process plays out.
How do you see this playing out? Is this going to be a problem for agencies as everything moves so quickly?
I think the short time frame is going to lead to a lot of agencies relying on a lot of the public infrastructure for testing. Although, there might be agencies who, that are already, like the VA, stuff like that, where they have a lot of people who are coming to work regularly and they have to screen patients and staff regularly. I mean, they might have a easier time with setting something up on site. I think it might cause some confusion, the line between federal employee and contractor on some of these things. Yeah, I'm curious to see how it rolls out.
Yeah, it's interesting as we've talked about how this really affects people who have to be in the office or have to deal with the public. Sort of transition a little bit to the Opm Telework Report. They released it last week. What does it say about feds teleworking during the pandemic across government?
Well, as you might imagine, there are a lot more of them doing it, is the short answer. During the, this report came out, it's dated December. It came out probably around the end of the year, and it covers the 2020 fiscal year. So it covers the first 6 months of the pandemic, more or less. And it found that during that period, 50% of all federal workers were eligible to telework, which is a 11 percentage point increase from fiscal 2019. But crucially, 90% of eligible employees engaged in telework, which is a gigantic increase, like 34% over 2019. One thing the pandemic made difficult for some agencies is, so this report requires agencies to set and report on goals that they have for, either both increasing telework, improving the quality of telework, reporting on, various impacts of telework on federal agencies. And, some of those things, it was tough to really pin down with data because of the sort of the chaos of the pandemic, the big shift, the push to maximum telework. But one thing that agencies got a lot better at was estimating cost savings. And across government, they estimate that telework saved the federal government $180 million. And that goes from everything like commuting costs, recruitment and retention improvement, reduced employee absences, all sorts of things. Less spending on utilities. But I do think it is important to note that we talk a lot about telework and sort of this idea that the federal government really has gone super remote work over the course of the pandemic. But as the data shows from this report, half of federal employees still aren't eligible for telework, in many cases because their jobs, are not really portable. So, it is important to keep in mind that as much as we talk about telework, there's a lot of work that the federal government does and that the federal employees do that is being done in person, in really dangerous times.
Yeah, I think there's this idea that everyone who works for the federal government or various agencies just can do their work from home, and that is not the case. Obviously, the most obvious version of that is federal law enforcement or the transportation security agents, but there's certainly plenty of other people who have customer-based, face-to-face things, including, as you mentioned, VA and healthcare and things like that. Let's keep with OPM. The agency proposed some regulations to formalize the repeal of 2 Trump-era executive orders. These orders made it easier to fire and to discipline feds. What are the regulations and what's sort of the feature of them?
So these regulations repeal another set of regulations that implemented those executive orders. Like you said, those original regs came out, I believe, November 2020, like right before the election. And they basically said that agencies should not provide struggling employees with any help other than that which is required by law, which is, federal law says if there's a non-performing employee, they need to be given an improvement period of at least 30 days and some sort of help, although it's kind of vague what that is, to try to improve their performance. And basically, these regulations made it so that agencies would not help as much as they previously had. They also required agencies to give managers reminders about the end of a new employee's probationary period at, I believe, 3 months and 1 month before the end of the period, as a way to try to encourage them to make a so-called affirmative decision about whether or not they are working out as an employee. Because once you get past the probationary period, you have all sorts of removal protections. Basically, what these new regs do is repeal all of that and offer sort of a counter argument to a lot of these things. One thing the OPM brings up in these regulations is that they're very prescriptive, and in ways that might not actually be that efficient. They say it is very good for agencies to remind managers of when people's probation periods are about to expire, but the manner in which it goes about it is very basically and aids from reaching settlements with employees over disciplinary issues in which an employee would agree to resign in exchange for having their disciplinary record, something from their personnel record expunged. And it turned out this made litigation more likely and made everything more costly for agencies when they're dealing with employees who were engaged in misconduct. Basically, it took away a really important tool in settling these things quickly and getting these people out of service. So it actually kind of made it harder to fire these people in some ways. So all of that is gone now, or will be. It's a proposed rule. There's 30 days of comment, and then they will issue a final rule sometime after that. So
Yeah, I was going to say if it's not, we're not there yet, but presumably that is something OPM will have after the comment rule period. We'll end on something that's we talk about a lot on the show because it's a personal focus of mine. OPM's set to publish more regulations this time on implementing the Elijah E. Cummings Federal Employee Anti-Discrimination Act. Remind me and our listeners what's in the law and how it will affect feds, specifically, again, for my own edification, the whistleblower side of things.
It really ties anti-discrimination and whistleblower complaints together here. Basically, what this does is it, on one hand, it improves agencies' transparency on a lot of discrimination and whistleblower retaliation issues. It requires them to publish notice on, publicly on their website, not just internally, whenever a case is finished in which it finds that an agency or an agency employee has intentionally engaged in discrimination or whistleblower retaliation. And it requires an improvement to annual reports on this issue to Congress. It improves reporting of these cases resolution to EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And it also requires agencies to take action against, take disciplinary action against employees who are found to have committed, acts of discrimination or whistleblower retaliation in the workforce, or submit a report to the EEOC explaining why it didn't. So it really does a lot to sort of hold agencies accountable to, keeping track of these things in a better way, and to making sure the public is aware, and and they can hold agencies accountable.
Yeah, hopefully this is the kind of thing that can take off and be implemented easily. Eric, thanks so much for being on the show with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to GovExec Daily. Our show was produced by Adam Butler and hosted by me, Ross John Fortunae. We want to thank Erich Wagner for joining the program. Our music is the song Signals by Catfish Dancing. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anywhere else you get your podcasts. You can email us any feedback at podcast@govexec.com or hit us up on Twitter @govexec. We'd love to hear from you. We'll talk to you later.